I'm Shelby, and this is Filmish Chats. Hello and welcome. I'm Shelby Cook, head curator and editor-in-chief at Film East, and today I'm joined by Will Schofield and Ishnor to discuss Alexander Payne's newly minted Christmas classic, The Holdovers. This podcast is part of Film East Online, a space for free online content in varying media to educate, inform, and inspire all things cinema. Film East is a multi-award-winning global film organization based in the east of England and the east coast of the U.S. You can view all of our free online film criticism publications, podcast episodes, and interviews by visiting film-east.com. A curmudgeonly instructor at a New England prep school remains on campus during Christmas break to babysit a handful of students with nowhere to go. He soon forms an unlikely bond with a brainy but damaged troublemaker and with the school's head cook, a woman who has just lost her son in the Vietnam War. Upon its release in 2023, The Holdovers won hearts all over film Twitter for its melancholic outlook on the holiday season and its vintage 1970s aesthetic. But in this episode, we investigate whether this film is worthy of its status as a contemporary Christmas classic. This is the last episode of Filmish Chats for 2025. Boo, I know. But we will return for one more episode in season 6, an Oscars special, before going on a short break. We're already planning season 7, and I promise it's going to start with a bang. So without further ado, this is Filmish chatting for the last time in 2025 about The Holdovers.
Ho, ho, ho. Welcome back to Filmish Chats. Today we're talking about The Holdovers, but guess what? Ishnor's back! Woo! Ishnor's been held captive by a film festival. She's been released just in time to talk about the holly jolly season. Nothing says Christmas like depression. That's right. That was my Letterboxd review for the Holdovers.
Yeah.
So let's start before we start talking more generally about the film. Let's talk about what holiday films are. We did an episode a couple of years ago on Tokyo Godfather, so we talked about this a little bit before. But what to you is a holiday film? What classifies as a holiday film?
Right out the gate, I'm a firm believer in not so much that Die Hard isn't a Christmas film, but that it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
For years now, there's been a big debate as to whether does it count as a Christmas film? It's set at Christmas. There's Christmas trees. It's snowy. That means by default it's a Christmas film. And I disagree with the very thesis of that. I disagree that Batman Returns is a Christmas film. I I mean, just because a film has like snow in it or is set around the Christmas period, there are films that take place over years. Does that mean that certain scenes of those films are Christmas films? I don't think it's an aesthetic thing at all. I mean, the aesthetic is the factor, but for me, it's a thematic thing that makes a film truly a Christmas film. Tokyo Godfathers is my favorite Christmas film, and that takes place almost entirely after Christmas, in like the week following. I believe it's the week following Christmas up to around New Year's, and yet it's so centered on the ideas of coming together and family and gifts and love that for me is a far stronger Christmas film. But that's where I sit in the box, but I know that it's a spectrum. So I expect some.
Yeah. For me, for a Christmas film, I'm going to be dramatic. Give
Oh,
me loneliness.
yes.
Give me
Yeah.
Yes, let's go.
drama. Give me all of that. And it's not about the literal inclusion of Christmas in the film, but it's more so associated with the emotional tenor
Mm.
that is there. So the generosity, the forgiveness, the family, the found family or the makeshift family, all of that for me is a Christmas film. And as Will said, uh, I forgot the name.
Godfather.
Yeah, Tokyo Godfather, sorry, is very good. But I think my favorite Christmas film would be Tangerine, for all said and done, because
Ooh.
I think that that something supersedes every other film that I have watched. The holiday film, the Christmas film. I don't want Christmas carols. I don't want the trees. I don't want the snow. Give me everything gritty and people figuring it out and people
Yeah.
lonely and depressed and then coming together and then drinking. That for me is a Christmas film.
I think there's also a marketability aspect to creating Christmas films, like you were saying, Will, about, oh, there are scenes that are set at Christmas. I think about Call Me by Your Name. The entire movie set in
Mm.
summer, but there's one Hanukkah scene at the end. Um, I guess maybe it is technically Christmas or Hanukkah, I don't know. But that could be perceived as a holiday film. Call Me by Your Name is not a holiday film. It's a summer film. But I think there's this push by studios to want to put a holiday scene in so that way it gets played every year again and again. Like Harry Potter is one of them, especially in the US, that always gets played at Christmas time. People consider that a
Mm.
Christmas movie um, because there's one Christmas scene in it. Um, but I think, like you said, Ishnoor, I think that there's a thematic element to it that makes a film a holiday film. Um, I like cheery holiday films. I watch enough depressing movies during the rest of the time of the year. Um, but I think one of my favorite holiday films, and I will die on this hill, is Hugo. No one else likes this movie but me. I'm the only person that watches this movie. And I don't even think it's set at Christmas. I don't know it's just that movie to me is a Christmas film because it has that sort of collective togetherness. It's fighting against the system, but there's also like something magical happening in it. And I think that's what you see with Tokyo Godfathers is there's something magical happening. I think even in
Mhm.
Tangerine, there's something magical happening. Um, it's the sort of, oh, I don't really want to say like higher power. It's Santa Claus, the
It's the
higher power.
Christmas miracle.
It's the Christmas miracle at play. Um, there's something special happening in the air, in a holiday film that you can't quite, you know, although most of them are grounded in realism, there's always something a little special sprinkled in. It's like the
Mm.
music, I think, is what always alerts you to the something magical happening.
I
Uh,
remember last year I showed a group of friends Wonka at Christmas, and I don't think there's a single snowflake in that movie. There's nothing Christmassy about it, but it's got that kind of, sweet, colorful
yeah.
candy aesthetic to it and everything. It felt very in season. And so, if it's that loosey goosey, then anything
Mhm.
can be anything.
Yeah. And yeah, and I think that that's again, it's something magical happening in Wonka. I think it's just that like feel good, nice move. I can foresee in the future Wicked's going to become a holiday movie because
Mm.
people
Mhm.
just they have a nostalgia for it. It's something that is special. Um, where does the holdovers land on here? So a couple of years ago, the holdovers came out. Um, Obviously, it is technically narratively set at Christmas. It's these kids who get left at their boarding school over Christmas break. Um, but where do you see, would you watch this movie every year at Christmas? Would this become a Christmas classic for you?
I certainly
Um,
think so personally. I think I I think we've just discussed the kind of the difference between a Christmas like aesthetic and the Christmas vibes and the themes and all those. I think the Holdovers is kind of the perfect swirl of all of it. It's set at Christmas. It's revolves around Christmas trees and Christmas activities and a Christmas break. It's all very the chronology of it's centered around Christmas. But in like a wider sense, it's also very much about found family and togetherness, and it's got that little those little hints of tragedy in there. It's got I mean the one thing it doesn't really have is a ghost story, but other
Mhm.
than that, I'd say it's a pretty I don't know if I'd watch it yearly. But I certainly watched it 2 years ago when it came out around Christmas, and then I watched it well again for this 2 years later, and maybe biannually
Yeah.
is a
All right, we're gonna hold you to
I
that.
I think my opinion is exactly opposite to Will's because I
really.
don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. I will watch it for Christmas. I also don't think so. I'll watch it again.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't think for me it was a Christmas holiday setting film. I feel like it could have been done over any other
Yeah.
break where people are
Mm.
left alone in a hostel and these people have to confront their issues. So it Christmas, the urgency of doing something good or the urgency of Christmas being a pressure cooker, I didn't feel it in this film. And the frustration, the loneliness was not very exclusive to Christmas, apart from one student staying back.
Hmm.
And that could have been done in any other holiday
Yeah.
season. Yeah.
Summer break could have been a summer
Summer
break
break, spring break,
film.
anything.
Hmm.
So
But is
and the
there,
plot would barely change.
yeah,
Mm.
but is there something, I mean, is there something about the fact that it's at Christmas that makes these characters, I'm thinking particularly the teacher, um, that makes him a little bit softer because because of the season? Do you think it's his character would still be as, I mean, I guess his character would still be as accepting of um the student uh if it wasn't the
Yeah,
holidays, if there wasn't, the tragedy of being left alone at the holidays.
I
yeah. I feel like the professor just wants to I really love his character. He
Hmm.
was one of my favorite in the films, but I think all in all he just wanted to be seen and heard.
Mm.
That is all he wanted to be. So that would have happened even if he was left alone because like how in the beginning he says that Dr. Green said that we will not lie, I will not do this, I will not. So he basically is just really craving to be seen for who he is
Hmm.
and not and everything that he's doing is to just be important because he's had a certain history of being not being in Harvard, losing out on that,
Hmm.
not being where his peers are. So he's always hiding in that. So in that matter, he just wants to be loved for who he is, and that is why he's not made connections. So it was just a matter of fact of all of them being in the same room and him feeling that softness. That is, I, yeah,
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's quite important as well that so often throughout the film he'll say something or he'll do something, and then it's Mary who kind of leans over to
Yeah.
him and is like, "Hey, it's Christmas. You can't be acting
Mhm.
like that at Christmas. You gotta." And it takes a lot of pressure, like actual pushing from the other two to get him to try and to at least try. And it's about halfway through the film where he actually goes out and tries to get like a Christmas tree and presents and stuff, and he starts being
Yeah.
like, "All right, maybe I should try acting this season." Um, but yeah, no, I feel like he was kind of content uh to not and just to yeah have nothing to do with it. Have no tree, no presents, no cookies or anything. Um, and yeah, I don't know if he really changes throughout the movie because even by the end, it never really struck me that he'd found the spirit of the season.
Hmm.
It just kind of he just kind of more found the joy of just hanging out with them and kind of getting along with Angus and
Yeah.
um. Mm,
Yeah, that was something that I was considering too was this, I think the drawl of it is this push and pull between the older generation and the younger generation. Obviously, Angus is um youthful and he wants to be rebellious because of his youth. And Paul is stuck in his, curmudgeon old age. He's stuck in the rules. So there's that, the conflict is that push and pull between generations. And I was like thinking about, well, what's the solution to this push and pull? And there really isn't one. It is that Paul and Angus do begin to see each other eye to eye. They do start to understand each other once they get to know each other more. But when school starts back up again, Paul's just as strict. He's just as
Mm.
uh, harsh on the boys, and Angus is still just as much of a terror to the school. They don't fundamentally change, but they appreciate each other's point of views more. They
Mm.
understand each other better. Um, so I think something that really appealed people about this movie was the 70s aesthetic and how it captured this very particular moment in time, this particular moment in cinema. And going on from that last point, one of um, the cinematographer remarked that how they, why they wanted to do this movie in this aesthetic was, quote, there's a sense of the spirit of the 70s movie breaking away from your studios. And all the DPs of the period that I really admire would push the film stock and they would do handheld whatever. And then they started thinking, this is really what I should be going for in terms of this movie. The film is shot on digital, but it's added that everything in terms of the film grain, the coloring is added in post. Um, does the fact that it's shot on digital, trying to reminisce as a 70s movie, does that take away from what it's trying to say? Anyone have any thoughts about the aesthetic of the 70s?
I don't think so. I think it is very clearly, I think the way it's shot is it never felt like it was aiming to film it like a 70s film in the sense that like it had the aesthetic, it had the aesthetic of like you mentioned the grain, but it still felt like it was filmed like a very kind of modern film, how we make films now. There were fewer like I guess lingering shots. Stuff I associate with the 70s is often kind of just long shots of people's faces and
Mm.
stuff, and far, I guess, harsher lighting in a lot of cases.
Mm.
Um, to me, it still very much felt like a 21st century film, just with those kind of aesthetics, and I just with like the trappings of a 70s film, the costumes and the After Effects grain, and references to like what Coke cans looked like at the time and stuff. But I don't necessarily see that as a flaw because it's a modern story being told in the setting of the 70s, and so it being a modern film told in the vague style of the 70s, it fit quite well. um I if I'm remembering correctly, I believe the film opens up with like uh 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 the logos of several
Yeah.
companies done in the style of it was the 70s.
Mhm.
And if I'm not mistaken, those weren't like their real logos from the
No.
70s. They had them made up in the style of like what this is what our company would feel like in the 70s. And I feel like that's a big part of it for me. It wasn't an attempt to recreate the 70s as it was an attempt to kind of recreate the feel of a 70s film, I guess,
Yeah.
which is not accurate to real history. It's just the aesthetic. um yeah.
And there's something interesting too now that you just said that about history. There's something interesting because Paul
Mhm.
is so stuck on history, right? That's
Mm,
his whole thing is, the the past, but it's a film that's also stuck in the past. Um, there's something that you know, I was trying to put my finger on what is it about this film that connected with people so much, because this film was just such a, like, people just adored this film when it came out. And I think there was something about, the time period of the 70s. If you think, it was a couple of centuries, a couple of decades after the war, things were starting to improve economically, socially, but there was also this, like, I think the 70s was this period where there was a lot of cultural tension, in terms of the youth were really fighting back against conservative ideas. And there was a huge boom in art and this sort of very challenging art. And it was a period that was a lot of tension, a lot of push and pull between ideologies. And that's something that we are experiencing now. I think perhaps more overtly within the past 2 years, than perhaps when this film was made, not as overtly. Um, but I think it's something interesting that this is a film that's about history, that's set in the past, but it still is very much a reflection of a lot of the issues that are occurring present day. And a lot of a reflection of how our current period is reverting back to those same tensions and ideologies that were found in the 70s. Does anyone? Oh, go ahead, Ishnoor.
Yeah. So I feel like this film does touch upon the issues of the privilege.
Mm,
It does talk about the war a bit. It talks about these big themes of class, grief, coming of age, and then through Paul, intellectualism. It does touch upon those things, but also treats them as a mood rather than
mm,
big ideas.
yeah.
So it doesn't interrogate them.
Hmm.
It just said it in the passing. So how it is impacting these characters, apart from that one scene when he buys those two people beers, apart from that scene, I don't know if all of these big ideas that are spoken throughout the film actually manifest themselves into the storyline
Yeah.
itself. So that is what I felt like a more felt like a more surface level and a
Mm.
uh, very studio safe sort of script.
Is
I
do you, oh, go ahead, Will.
No, I was gonna say I agree, and I think specifically whenever I watch the film, I'm always struck by like Mary's son, who
Mm,
is established at the beginning, died in Vietnam, a war which at the time the
yeah.
movie set would have still been ongoing, and yet he it the tragedy of his character, they never really discuss the war, especially when it's a film about, this young boy who is having threats of being sent off to a military academy. It's never the threat is it's never kind of pushed on to the audience the obvious implications that if he is kicked out of Barton and sent to military academy, he's probably going to die.
Yeah.
The tragedy of Mary's son being killed is not the tragedy of a pointless war halfway across the planet. It's this this young mother has lost her son, and
Mhm.
that's sad, which it is. But it's like Ishmael said, it's not really. It doesn't go any deeper into the wider commentary on the societal impact of that. What it is,
Yeah.
it's solely focused on the human kind of aspects of these three characters and how it affects them personally.
Yeah.
Do you think the reason why this film is so beloved is because it doesn't really address those challenging issues? It doesn't, it like, there's sort of this facade that oh yeah, it is a film about Vietnam, and it doesn't actually address those problems. It's sort of all, like you were saying, it's in the background. Um, I'm thinking particularly, I mean, the reason I bring this up is because I think this year we have seen a lot of films that have been very controversial, that have dealt with this, a lot of the cultural issues that we're having at the moment in terms of cancel culture, virtue signaling, the political discourse. I'm thinking Eddington, After the Hunt, and a lot of these films were panned. No one went to go see them in the cinemas. People hated them because they were addressing these really, they were giving these perspectives of our current society that, are challenging, that are making people consider how they act our in our society. I think I really appreciated After the Hunt. I haven't seen Eddington yet, but it is on my list to watch. Um, what I really appreciated about After the Hunt was that it dealt with these issues, but didn't give a perspective on how either side is right or wrong. And I think something with this film is that it doesn't really deal with those issues. It makes the issues seem very small. There is this push and pull between the generations. Obviously, that's something that we're seeing now, and that's something that After the Hunt addresses, is the push and pull between generations and how you deal with these controversial things within your society. Um, but it just, in the Holdovers, it makes it seem like so simple, right? It's just like, oh, well, if you spend time with that person, you begin to understand them. And then you can see their point of view and everything works out. Everyone's happy, because they understand each other now. And he is very brave and he stands up for this kid. He loses his job because of this kid. Um, but I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm grasping at straws here, but I that was something that I was thinking about, when I was putting these questions together for this episode.
I feel like not every film needs to discuss the issues in
Yeah.
depth.
Hmm.
We have to be very clear about that. Like, people are making films, they're making the films too. There is a financial side to it as well. So this film is like a bubble that people want to be in
Yeah.
while everything else is going around in the world. So this film is sort of a safety net or something, a hope of, okay, things are as simple as this and
Hmm.
solutions are as simple as this. So I think the reason it did well was because it appealed to that side of people, while they're listening to many atrocities happening around the world.
Hmm.
So this makes them feel okay. So I think that must have been the reason that it worked. And also, uh, I have a problem with films talking about these issues, using them as, like I said, moods and not interrogating them. So my
Yeah.
opinion would be to not talk about it at all then.
Hmm.
Don't use the issues just to tick a box that, hey, we spoke about it. So a film becomes about this. Don't do that. Either use it completely properly, like as Will said, that Mary's son, and that character had the most emotional journey of all, but was sidelined by the other two characters. We don't get to see or delve into the grief of Mary. And that even that crying scene felt like a cop out, like it had to be there. Uh, so if they had not discussed those issues or even touched upon them, it would have been, it would have landed more for me personally.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, that's perhaps the appeal of the Christmas movie, right? I mean, we're going back to the Christmas film. That's why, um, there's still a conflict, there's still a challenge that these characters have to face, but it is ultimately a positive outlook on life, right? It still has that feel good, there is a reason to live, uh there's something special about the holidays that bring people together. And there's not, you don't have to face these problems at Christmas because it's Christmas. The world doesn't matter at Christmas. It's about the people that you're with. And perhaps that's why it works so well as a Christmas film, or um yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I agree with you. I think it's like, are you using these? I mean, I think it goes back to the history. I think it's grounding the film in the historical moment by mentioning these things. But you're right. What is the point of Mary's story about losing her son if it's not why, sure, you can bring it up in context. Mary lost her son, but it didn't feel like that narrative was really going anywhere.
Yeah,
It was just kind of
absolutely.
like here, we're grounding this in this woman lost her son in the war. But she's a black woman and he's a black kid at a predominantly white upper class school. He went to this school, right? So what was his point of being at the school as a black man? She works in the kitchen. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. We don't have the solutions to
Yeah,
the world.
yeah. So basically, so this film does sets up these complex, prickly character and relationships, but what it does is that it resolves them with a bow that's a little too neat.
Hmm.
So that happens in this. Like the emotional payoff of this film is very low, if you look at it. I think I'm ruining the film for Will. Sorry, Will.
No, no, I completely agree. My thoughts on it have always been the ending was felt very strange
Hmm.
because uh, at the ending they he stands up for Angus. They say he gets fired. They say their goodbyes. This is spoilers, by the way. Um, they say goodbyes to one another. They have like a very brief hug, and then Angus is like, "All right, see ya," and they both just kind of go off.
Yeah.
And I was always very much struck by the kind of, okay, what's next? Angus's life hasn't really demonstrably changed, and I really don't think that the 2 weeks that they spent together, they had a lovely time, but it's not like he's a new person at the end of it. He hasn't learned a massive life lesson, and the same with the teacher Paul. He's going to go off. Maybe he'll get another job. Maybe he won't. But like, how often are they going to think of each other after
Hmm.
this? And normally, I quite like that kind of feeling at the end of a movie that we've just seen a brief moment in time of these people's lives, and there's so much more of the story going on. But I think what Ishno says about it being wrapped in too neat of a bow is that it doesn't really capture that feeling. It doesn't feel like these are fully grown characters, and
Yeah.
we've just seen this 2 week snippet of their life. It feels like they were characters in the story, and even though there's more stuff to go on, there's it, they're not going to go. It doesn't feel like they're going off to live their own life. It feels like they're walking off so the credits can start, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I found that quite jarring.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I completely agree with that. I think there's not, you know, there's not a change in the characters, like you were saying. Like they do understand each other, but when the school starts back up again, Paul's just as harsh and just as cruel to the kids. It's like, it is kind of like, I don't know. I genuinely think what appealed to people was the production of it, was how grounded in the 70s it was. Um, I mean, I don't know. I just feel like people are just obsessed with this movie. Um,
mm.
and I'm not a huge Alexander Payne fan either. Like I just don't find his movies very exciting. Um, so I don't know.
Well, it is interesting to me that like have you guys seen Sideways?
Mm-mm.
It's that was his like a film he made in the 2000s, and also starring Paul Giamatti, and I think was very popular when it came out. It was a little bit of a cultural touchstone in some areas, I guess, but very similar in terms of vibe and Paul Giamatti's character, and kind of like the plot's different, but it's very compared to Alexander Payne's other films and stuff. They really do feel like they're both part of the same, like it's a spiritual successor, I think is the
Mm.
term. And so it is interesting to me that this film that like it is so popular and stuff is kind of a little bit of a fresh coat of paint on this other film we did 20 years ago. And that, again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sideways is a good film, and I think I like The Holdovers more. But yeah, it's I don't know, I just always find that quite interesting, particularly given that his other films like Election and what have you are very different,
Mm.
even though that one, for instance, is also set in a high school and is about a bad teacher and his woes. You'd think those would be more closely related, but they're not.
And I think it is interesting to see like when artists return to subjects from their past because you can see how they've grown. Um, I don't particularly have a problem with that.
Mm.
Because you can see how their craft has grown, how they tackle the same idea and how it has evolved over the course of their career. I find that actually really interesting. Um, but yeah, what's our conclusion here? It's a Christmas movie, so it's wrapped up in a nice, pretty bow. Is that our conclusion
Mm.
about the film?
Yes, and it is comforting, warm, familiar, and that's why it maybe worked for people.
And that's okay. It's okay to have that type of movie.
Yeah, yes. Will, you can love that film.
Yeah, I think there's a nostalgia about it that
Yeah.
which is really funny because I mean maybe it's just my echo chamber of the internet, but I only have ever seen young people that love this movie. It's like you
Mm.
would think that the people who actually lived in the 70s would be like, "Oh, I love this movie. It's like all about the 70s." But like I've only ever seen like film, film bros who are like, "Yeah, that movie's so great." And it's like you're 20 years old. You don't even know what the 70s is. Like
Yeah,
I don't
yeah. I read somewhere someone wrote that this film feels like that somebody has made this film after watching 70s film, but
Yeah.
not
Mm.
after having lived in the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm reminded of like Stranger Things and stuff like that that
Sure,
do a
yeah.
lot with the 80s aesthetic, where if you actually, I'm sure, went through and mapped it out, very little of it would actually be correlate to what the 80s was actually like or what the aesthetic even would have been. It's more, I mean, it's someone who was born and lived now imagining it. And I feel like that's kind of the same. And like, I think you mentioned, Shelby, some 70s movies like The Graduate and Harold and
Yeah.
Maude and stuff, which have a very 70s aesthetic because that's when they were made. And just like, I mean, they're all so much more tragic and mean spirited and stuff, and they
Yeah.
don't have, even though they are, lovely films with a lot of really heartwarming bits and stuff, especially Harold and Maude. It's got this weird bittersweetness about it that the holdovers. It's a little bit bittersweet, but in a very kind of safe way, I guess.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
but I guess it's just left with being sweet, which is, fine.
that to me, that's the problem, is that the 70s were so freaking crazy that like this movie's not crazy enough to be a 70s movie because they like,
I agree.
like I just think of like the most bizarre movies that have ever been made were made in the 70s. And like, it's just not crazy enough. Like The Wicker
Yeah,
Man or
Oh
Cuckoo's
yeah.
Nest or, like these really like insane subjects for movies that are just like this movie's just yeah, it's too, and I guess that goes back to it's more of a vibe thing than it is like actually grounding of what this film is about because it is a contemporary movie that's trying to be a 70s film, but you're not a 70s film because you're not crazy enough. You're not insane enough. I'm sorry.
yeah, I think.
Any last minute thoughts on The Holdovers?
Mm, I'm good.
I do like it. It's not a bad movie. There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with it, but it ties up with a nice bow, and that's Christmas films for you.
Yeah,
It
I
needs
yes.
really
to
like
have a little bit of joy.
I really like the bit where he
And
gets the meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and he just
And
turns
he
out
has
he just he
and he's
just
like
keeps giving them up.
and he's packing up his office and he has like a whole box of them.
Yeah.
yeah, I
Uh
liked Paul.
yeah.
Mm.
I liked them making the joke about what eye he's supposed to look at
Yeah.
with his lazy eye. And I loved the marketing when this movie came out. Everyone was like, "Does Paul Giamatti have a lazy eye?" Like, because you're like, "Man, this looks so real. Like, maybe he does."
He feels like the kind of guy who would, I
Yeah.
guess.
Uh-huh.
Hopefully you have enjoyed this episode of Film East Chats. To learn more about Film East and our film criticism publications, upcoming events, and unique activities, visit our website, film-east.com, or follow us on any of our social media at films_east. And make sure you're subscribed to Film East Chats anywhere you listen to podcasts, including Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube, so you never miss one of our deep dives into film and TV. Again, we're Film East Chats, and you'll hear from us next year. Bye.